All right, very good. All right, let me make sure I'm on one here. I am. All right. You owe me. You owe me. Anybody ever say that to you? You owe me. I deserve this. I'm entitled to this. We're hearing this more and more, and really our publicly funded schools and our government is actually encouraging this, us to feel like our lives are entitled, that we are owed things. If you are meeting, sometimes people from other places are watching this, you certainly are listening right now, but if you're meeting in a fellowship this Lord's Day of God's people where they never make it clear what God is entitled to, and they leave you with a distinct impression that you can just do life the way you want to, it's no big deal, I'm going to give you some advice this morning if you're there. Stand up and run. That is not a place you want to be. And the reason why I say that is because the scriptures are clear. God is entitled to everything that we have, right? He's entitled to your life, to your finances, your time, all that you have. We are owed nothing. I am owed nothing. I'm not owed the privilege of standing here as a pastor with the privilege of proclaiming one more Lord's Day, the Word of God. God owes me nothing. Doesn't owe me the privilege of doing that. We are not owed a place to meet this morning, right? This is all grace. It's not owed to you. We're not owed preaching this morning. Not. We are not owed by God the privilege to share the gospel. We're not owed the sweet fellowship that so many of us love when we come here. And we're not owed a place, as much as we love this, we're not owed a place where our kids can learn the Word of God safely. We are not owed this. It's all grace. It ought to make us fall down on our faces and say, thank you, Lord, for saving my soul. Thank you for making me whole. Look at the grace of God you've given to me, because you owe me none of this stuff. We are owed, if we are left to ourselves, eternity separated from Christ in a place called hell. And thank the Lord, if you know Christ, that's not your future. So can I ask you, do you give to God what he is entitled to? Do you? We've been talking about faith choices in the book of Joshua, and if you're new, thank you for being here. Come back. But you helicoptered into a series on the book of Joshua. So it's a little bit like hitting the ground running right now. Realize that a lot of us have heard all the lead-ups to this. So we're talking about two faith choices from the book of Joshua as the children of Israel are about to conquer Jericho. You've probably heard of Jericho. And the first faith choice was to do what the wise of this world would consider foolish. That's what they had to do. The soldiers were doing what in the world's eyes would have been foolish to do. You don't circle around a city to conquer it. Walls don't just fall down. That's foolish. And God tested them. I know you think it's foolish, but you're going to have to trust me on this. That was last week. And then this week, the second faith choice is this: to give to God what everyone else would feel entitled to. Now, there's nobody that you're going to meet who doesn't feel like they're entitled. And it's tough for them to release anything from them. And maybe you, I don't know. We're tempted like this. Christians are. To release out of our hands the things that we are entitled to, right? Well, God's going to test them. I want you to offer to me what you're not entitled to, but you're going to be tempted to want it, right? So Israel offers two things this morning. Israel offers to God what he is entitled to. And God is trustworthy to bless them in this choice. You just do. I know it doesn't seem to make sense to you, but you offer to me what I'm entitled to, not you, and watch how I will honor that the way I choose to, by blessing you. Look with me, verse 17 through 19 of chapter 6. That's where we are this morning. The city shall be under the ban, and all that is in it belongs to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot and all who are with her in the house shall live, because she hid the messengers whom we sent. But as for you, only keep yourselves from the things under the ban, so that you do not covet them and take some of the things under the ban, and make the camp of Israel accursed and bring trouble on it. But all the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron are holy to the Lord. They shall go into the treasury of the Lord. On the very day that God was about to give Israel the ultimate blessing, I'm going to give the city of Jericho to you. That had to be a time of great anticipation and expectation and joy. On the very day that he did this, he also cautioned them. That's a good thing to keep in mind. I want you to be careful. Here was the caution. The city that you're about to take is under what I call the ban. We'll explain in a moment. And that means that all that is in it belongs to the Lord. And that means, class, it doesn't belong to you. So you leave it alone, right? So keep yourselves from the things that are under the ban. Now, God had already given them so much, right? God is generous. He's gracious. He'd given them so much. And he's already been true to his promises that he would promise to give them even more. There is so much more to come. God wants them in their gratitude to not keep what this world would think it's entitled to, you know? The world in this situation would say, to the victor goes the what? Do you know that phrase? Is that an old one? To the victor goes the spoils. If we win this battle, this stuff is ours. Today when I was a kid, we would say fighters, keepers, losers, weepers, right? It's mine. It's going to be tempting for them to feel the same thing. Now, God in his mercy, I want you to see this. In his righteousness and his mercy says, I'm going to head off a problem. Because when those walls crumble, and they're about to, it's going to fall flat, and you're going to start seeing things that you have not seen before. And there are things in there that I want for myself in Jericho. I don't want them for you. But when you see them, he uses this word. Did you see it? You're going to be tempted to covet them. Covet. It's a word that doesn't make prime time, does it? It's because this world is so geared toward covetousness, right? Which means you're going to think how essential. When people covet, when we covet, we think about how essential it is to have something that we're not really entitled to, at least maybe not at this time. And then we start imagining ourselves actually having it, or him, or her, and we start to run that through our imagination. It becomes real, doesn't it? And God says, before the walls ever fall, I want to head this off because you're going to be tempted this way. I don't want you to fall to this. So know that the moment it falls, the walls fall, that you're going to see stuff that you're going to want to covet after. And know that I told you now about that. It's great, isn't it, when God says, I don't want you flopping on this. I don't want you failing. So I want to prepare you ahead of time. I love you. You are my people. I want to equip you. Now, covetousness, he uses another verb, okay? And it's the verb take. Because that's where this goes, isn't it? Have any of you ever struggled with coveting something? How about coveting the truth? Because all of you have. We all have. And the more you run stuff through, you're looking at that thing, you're walking up and down. Shopping is a big pastime. Can get us in a lot of trouble, can it? I mean, I know what that's like. And the more you run stuff through your mind, it's like the Garden of Eden all over again, right? Considering the fruit from all different angles. Then you and I, they did certainly, it's no surprise that covetousness leads to taking. It leads to action. Now, nobody's surprised by that. What you might be surprised is that God says, I'm warning you about these things. I don't want you to fail, but I do want you to see a couple of other things. Because when you're tempted to covet, my dear children of Israel, you're going to want to take and understand that when you take, understand this now, that when you take, you are going to make the camp of Israel accursed when you do that. And just to be clear, that will bring all sorts of trouble into your life. Now, folks, if you've read the book of Joshua, is that true? It is. We're going to talk about that shortly. So I want you to, it sounds like the process of James chapter 1, chapter 2. temptation and then acting on temptation. So God, I think in his mercy, is saying, I don't want you failing in this way. So everybody follow what I'm telling you to do. Now the ban, the thing that we just talked about, what is that about? The ban meant that there were certain things that were devoted to God and that were banned from everyone else's use. That God was actually entitled to certain things that people were not, right? I want to ask you, friends, listen. Is it asking too much for God to say, this is mine and it's not yours? Right? Is he worthy of that? Yes or no? Sure, absolutely. And much more, right? So that's what the ban was about. He's certainly worthy of that. Anyone, we went on described it this way, anyone who destroys God's purpose for those banned things, they're mine. If you step in and destroy that, you will also face the same consequences of destruction. Now, it would have been a horrible thing if God didn't warn them about that, but he does warn them about this. This is mine. This is not yours. Is it okay for God to say that? This is mine, it's not yours. Right? All right. Now, verse 19. But all the silver and gold and articles of bronze and iron are holy to the Lord. They shall go into the treasury of the Lord. Now, here's another evidence of God's incredible mercy. He doesn't say to his people, when the walls fall down, there are certain things in there that I want. Good luck in trying to figure out what they are. No, he says, and I'm going to tell you exactly, because I don't want you failing in this. I want you to be successful. I want you, Joshua chapter 1, verses 7 and 8, I want you successful, and I want you, as I define it, prosperous in this mission. So I'm going to tell you exactly what to leave alone. Right? Silver, gold, bronze, and iron. By the way, God has a way. I hope you all hear this. God has a way of, while he is holy, like no one you know, and righteous and just, and he is. He is also extraordinarily merciful. And he often will tell people, I want you to steer clear because I don't want you to get in trouble in this. Look, Genesis chapter 3, do you remember that? I want you, Adam and Eve, I don't want you failing in this one. So I want you to be successful. I want you to be blessed by me, my way. So there's two trees. That sounds like a reverbing right now. Am I okay? All right. Something got loud up here. There are two trees that are mine. I mean, it's all mine. And I gave you so much of it. But there are two trees that I really don't want you taking of those trees and eating the fruit. They're mine. So that's God's mercy. So avoid those trees. Everything else is to be enjoyed by you. Haggai chapter 1. I know that you may not have had your devotions on the book of Haggai, but you ought to. Haggai chapter 1, when God allowed his people to come back into the land after the 70 years of captivity, he was so crystal clear, merciful, in telling them, you don't have to wonder what it is I want you to do. I'm going to tell you right now, I want you to go and build the temple. Now, that was easy to hear, right? And when they failed to do that, God came back and said, I'm going to be specific again. Things are kind of falling apart for you. But the temptation to back away from building the temple, here it is. Build the temple. Now that's easy to understand, right? So God had set apart certain things in this passage we're looking at. He had set apart some precious metals for his own use. Probably, it was going to be stored in the treasury of the temple eventually. Probably it would be used for worship more than likely. I mean, it's not like God actually needed it. He owns want to sing it? He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Why would he need your cattle? But he wants this. It's amazing how God often asks for things that he doesn't really need for his existence. What does he need? But he wants it. Right? So the carnal, by carnal I mean the fallen thinking that all of us, if you're saved or unsaved, You still have that carnal, fleshly side that you wrestled with this past week, right? When you got angry, when you got short with your patience. You're not in heaven yet, so we're still wrestling with that. We still have that carnal mind that we wrestle with. That carnal mind automatically assumes, it's good for us to know, it automatically assumes that you are entitled to everything. It's like Burger King. Have it your way. You're entitled to it, right? Don't let them hold anything back on you. This is America, right? So it assumes that. And amazingly, in this passage, God actually only asks his people, as we work through, you're going to see this. There are only 2 or 3 cities of all the cities of Canaan land that God said, I want those. They're under the ban for me. I want those. And I'll use you to conquer them. All the rest is there for you. What do you suppose people focus on when God says things like this? What about those things that you're keeping, God, because I want that too? He's trustworthy. Now, the godless in this world, people that you know who don't know the Lord, they're without God, probably their temptation would be to say, go in and grab everything. Just whatever's available, just go ahead and grab that. And because we're entitled to that, the carnal mind is by nature this way. We battle with this. Anybody here that does not battle with this at all? Okay. Well, you know they did too, and God mercifully was helping them. But 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 14 says that even though we have this in our nature, we can actually exercise it so it becomes supercharged in us. Have you ever wrestled with that? When you exercise yourself in covetousness and greediness, and it just starts taking off, and you'll get out of my way because all my life is geared toward that, or him, or her. Peter says that we can exercise ourselves unto that. The carnal mind says, it's my time, it's my paycheck, it's mine. It's mine. And can I say this to you, dear saint? There are people in Joshua's day who are wrestling with this. That's why God said what he said. They were tempted to withhold from God what was rightfully his. And there are people in the 21st century church who are tempted to withhold from God what is rightfully his. There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. Right? God is faithful. You find us in the Garden of Eden. The whole garden was Adam and Eve's, right? With the exception of those 2 trees. God really required so little. I mean, he requires so much. But in this case, required so little of them when it came to enjoying the garden. But they felt entitled to it, and they greedily consumed what actually belonged to God, right? They looked at it, they coveted it. I think it's good for eating, right? The serpent over here seems to be in agreement with us, right? This couple, Adam and Eve, what happened is they felt shorted by God. You're going to be tempted the same way. They felt shortchanged by God, like there should be more that we should be able to have. And I mean right now. Mom and Dad, don't tell me it's going to be later. Pastor, don't tell me it's going to be later. God, please don't tell me that enjoyment comes later because I want it now. So they are about to reap a hard harvest. Now think with me for a moment. What would have happened, I just thought about this for a little while, what would have happened if they would have made the right choice? I mean, the wrong choice resulted in them being banished from the garden. I don't know how this all works, but they probably would not have been banished from the garden. I think the Garden of Eden would have been a great place to live, don't you? They destroyed their relationship by making the wrong choice, by greedily wanting what God was withholding for himself. Their relationship with God apparently would have still been in the cool of the day walking with him. Just imagine what that is like. I don't know what it's like, but I sure would like to find out, wouldn't you? They ruined themselves and they ruined the human race. The whole human race, right? Think about all this being reversed, or not reversed, but never having happened if they had decided to allow God to have what was rightfully his and not to withhold it. He says Old Testament, Pastor. Yeah, it's New Testament too, right? The Corinthians. Are anybody surprised that we're about to talk about the Corinthians now? You know, the Corinthians lived in a world where, now listen to this, stay with me, because it's going to sound sneakingly suspicious or familiar to us. They lived in a world that taught them that their bodies were of no eternal importance. That's the world they lived in. That's what they got pumped into their minds. Our bodies are now. They're here for me to do with temporarily, whatever, because there's no eternal consequence. The body's not going to be around. Who cares? Well, Paul did. 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and chapter 6, your body, don't you know that your body is the temple, believer, of the Holy Spirit? That doesn't sound temporary, does it? So, if that's true, if the body is of no eternal importance, then it's fair game to do whatever I want to with my body. That's the kind of thinking that the Corinthians wrestled with. That's the kind of thinking that believers, young believers, and even middle-aged and older believers today are hearing more and more, or seeing modeled for them more and more today. How about this for a statement? This one would have flown in Corinth. My body, my choice. Heard that one before? That's the type of thing the Corinthians were hearing too. I'm entitled to this. Yet, folks, listen, sex was God's gift to enjoy. And you need to get this right, because the devil's a mastermind at perverting our view of what sex is about. It was his gift to give to us to enjoy. But it was to be done to his glory, when he said it was to be done, and how he said it was to take place. You see, he invented it. He's entitled, right? It's a gift that he wants to give. It's not yours and mine to take. He longs for it to be precious and special. When you turn if you do, turn the TV set on, do you get the impression that sex is something that's precious and special or not? Guess where that came from? Didn't come from God, right? There are not many other options left out there if it didn't come from him. He has the right to manage it. He has the right to say who you're allowed to enjoy that with and who you're not allowed to enjoy that with. He said it. He was clear about it. You see, it was a gift that he gave. He was entitled to be the one who administrated it. So people who are carnal, and we struggle with this too, and I would say even people in the church. So I'm not preaching to, the people on Main Street only in Alliance or Louisville, because this message is the message that God was giving to the Corinthian church. These were believers who wrestled with this. They're not to assume that they're entitled to the blessings of sexual pleasure when and how and with whomever they desire. Now, can you do that? Yes, you can. But let me add, 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 18, it is playing with fire to do that. This is the only sin that's described in all the Bible that has an impact on ourselves directly. I quote, against his own body. I don't know all what that means. But I love the fact that here's God again saying, like he was saying to the people who are about ready to invade Jericho, I just want you to know this ahead of time because I want this to be precious for you. I don't want this to be lost on you, right? But 1 Corinthians 6:18 seems to be indicating that in some fashion, sex outside of God-blessed marriage is declaring war on your own body. Okay? So why would God say that? You know what the devil would whisper to you? Because he wants you to be miserable. What a lie. The opposite is actually true. He wants you to grow in grace. He wants you to enjoy what he has given to you his own way. Now, back to our passage. So in Joshua chapter 6 and verse 20, look there with me. So the people shouted and priests blew the trumpets. And when the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the people shouted with a great shout, and the wall fell down flat. So the people went up into the city, every man straight ahead, and they took the city. They, verse 21, utterly destroyed everything in the city. And it goes on and describes they were obedient to what God said. God said, I want this city for myself. And they, without a comment, obeyed. It's a blessing, isn't it? God is trustworthy. The wonderful thing about this is, unlike the people of Haggai's day, and unlike Adam and Eve, the soldiers of Israel actually heard what God said. They believed Joshua 1, 7, and 8, that God would bless and honor if they would listen to his word. And without criticism, without comment, they walked into the city and he said, no, this is God's. He wants this. So they become trustworthy. They show their trustworthiness. They refuse to be entitled to something that's devoted to God. They gave to God what he said was entitled to him. And God would graciously reward them for this. Let me encourage you to read the rest of the book of Joshua. God honors this. There are hiccups along the way, I realize that. God's promise to graciously bless obedience of giving back to God what he is entitled to shows that he is trustworthy. When he did this, and he blessed them and would continue to bless them, he showed that his promises to bless obedience are something that people can trust, and you can. Now, that's not the end of the story. Look with me at the very last two verses of this chapter, verses 26 and 27. They kind of read kind of odd to us. We're not used to considering this. Verse 26 and 27, then Joshua made them take an oath at that time, saying, cursed before the Lord is the man who rises up and builds this city, Jericho, and the loss of his firstborn he will set, and with the loss of his firstborn he shall lay its foundation, and with the loss of his youngest son he shall set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was in all the land. You're about to see another truth in this passage. God is not only trustworthy in his blessings, he is also trustworthy in his warnings. Now, you know what? Can I talk to our kids just for a moment? And really, let's just broaden it out, because we all were kids at one time. Psalm 23 says that it's both the rod and the staff of God, both the positive thing and the corrective thing, that comforts the shepherd. And when your mom and your dad tell you, we're going to bless you for your obedience, you obey, and this is what's going to take place, you say, well, mom and dad are trustworthy. But they, to be fully trustworthy to you and to comfort your heart, that when they give you a warning, they need to follow through on that too. You don't take out the garbage, take out the garbage, and this is what happens. You don't take out the garbage, and I just want you to know right now, don't want it to happen, but if it does, this is what you can expect. There's something settling about knowing the whole story, right? And parents, by the way, that's important, to let them know the whole story. Well, here's the rest of the story. God is about to tell them that you can trust me when I warn you too. I'm totally trustworthy. And you just saw a moment ago, we'll see in a few chapters this same principle. God is going to stay true to his warning for violating the ban on them taking things that don't belong to them. Remember a guy, how you remember a man named Achan? Achan is going to prove as one sole example of what it's like to be a guy who doesn't take God seriously and doesn't think that God's warnings mean anything at all. So we're not there yet, though. But in this passage, we're hinted to something else. It appears that in verses 14 and 15, God had told his own people, in these two verses, when I knock these walls down, I don't want anybody refortifying these walls of my people. None of my people are supposed to come back here and rebuild these proud, arrogant fortifications that people were so overblown in their appreciation for their value for. This self-confident city. I don't want you to do that. Now, look up for just a second. You may not know this, but you will today. Jericho got rebuilt. And it wasn't long after the destruction, not awfully long after the destruction, its fortifications were rebuilt. And nothing happened. God doesn't mean what he said. It was rebuilt by Canaanites. And the agreement was not with the Canaanites. God was showing mercy to the Canaanites. More patience for lost people. But in first, if you don't need to turn there, but I want to read this to you. Did God really mean this? When he warned us, I don't want my people, when you own this city, I don't want you trusting in these fortifications like they did, making them a god. So, centuries later, in 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 34, listen to this. In his days, Hiel, it's a man, the Bethelite, built Jericho. This is hundreds of years later. This was an Israelite doing this. He laid its foundations. Oh, wait. You're not supposed to do that. He laid its foundations with the loss of Abiram, his firstborn. This is centuries after God said this. And set up its gates with the loss of his youngest son, Segu, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by Joshua, the son of Nun. When I look at this, friends, you know what goes through my mind? Does this go through your mind? People might think, yeah, but come on. This is so many years later. I know God doesn't forget, but we don't see stuff like this anymore. God's not going to, right? I mean, we watched the Canaanites rebuild. No, nothing ever happened to them. Hundreds and hundreds of years later. A Hebrew tries to rebuild the walls. And God takes his two sons. He kept his promise. And this man should have been warned. He knew, right? Yeah, but there's so many, doesn't make any difference, right? With God, 1,000 years is as a day. And with him, a day is as 1,000 years. Time means nothing to God at all, right? God is trustworthy when he says, I bless obedience. I just love to do that. But he is also trustworthy in saying,